Hello everybody. I know in my other videos I was, being coy saying, okay, I'm probably not going to make anything else. But since people actually watch that stuff, which I'm very flattered by the way that people did, I was like, okay, I'll make something else. I noticed people really liked that I had a chart, which makes sense. Being in court a lot, juries love visual aids like this. Helps them feel like they're understanding part of like what's going on with the investigation. Um, But anyway, here's my new super chart, which I'm very proud of. And basically, the majority of this video is going to be like Dabbleverse 101. Because as I said, I love everything about it, and I'm trying to get more people into it constantly. And what I've seen is that somebody is interested, or at least feigning interest, but they have a hard time following what I'm talking about because there's so many characters. Excuse me. There was a guy, I forget his name, I apologize, but he did a video about the origins of the Dabbleverse and focused on Stuttering John, and it was really good. I'll find it, and if I remember to do so, I'll post a link in my description. But anyway, it's fantastic, but he stops the video right at the birth of the Dabbleverse, where all of this stuff happens. And this was over a year ago, and the guy never did a part two. It was very sad. I don't know, maybe he died or something, I don't know. But like I said, if I can find part one of that, I'll add it in, and that can give you more information. But anyway, as you can see right here, it's a lot of people. Now, this is not the entire Dabbleverse. You might notice there's this little Australian flag up here. I taped that up last minute because it helps represent how it goes beyond this. There's this dude, his name's Dean. He's kind of famous in the Dabbleverse because of his name with Aaron. But he's in Perth, Australia. Now, I'm assuming most of you are stupid and don't know where Australia is, or if that, where Perth, Australia is. And to be fair, you shouldn't know because it's really the end of the earth. The only thing I could think of is the movie Quigley Down Under, which is a fantastic film. If you've never seen it, go watch. It's a Western in Australia. It's got sexy Tom Selleck, Alan Rickman. It's fantastic. But anyway, other than that, there's really no reason for anybody to know Perth, Australia exists. But this guy, he's in the Dabbleverse, and he makes fun of Aaron. He's also one of the few people that really focuses hatred on Gino, this guy. So I'm a big fan of him. And my point is, that guy's on the opposite side of the earth, and he's talking about all this kind of stuff. So it lets you know the Dabbleverse is much bigger than people think on average. So again, I want to try to explain it to where you could show this to an outsider and help get them interested in it and where they can understand who everybody is and what's going on. Again, this is not everybody, okay? For example, there's a guy named Pat Dixon. He should go right here. But I had to make, hard decisions like where's the cutoff. I can't put every single person in. So these are all people that have a degree of relevance. And like the really minor people, which will get honorable mentions, like I just mentioned Pat. But again, I can't put everybody in. This is a bigger board, by the way. The last video I did, my wife wanted her whiteboard back. So I was like, oh shit, I got to make a video real quick before I have to erase all this work. So that one was kind of rushed. But because I married a good woman, she went out and bought me an even bigger board and said, here, this is just for you with your little projects. So now I have more space. And I was able to make this, which again, I'm very proud of this. And all these little arrows and everything, all this will be explained. But before I get into that, of course, I have got to talk about Aaron for a couple minutes. Not a whole lot of time on him because I want to focus on this stuff. But he finally had his restraining order hearings on Friday. And basically, it was a big disappointment. There was some funny stuff that came out of it. The biggest takeaway is you could see old Kelly knew what he was talking about, where, the judge was excited, for lack of better words, that so many people were interested in what I was saying about judges and egos. And he, either because of that or was genuinely interested in this, which that would be awesome if this judge became a dabbler. But he let it go for way, way too long. Those restraining order hearings, originally, it's supposed to be half an hour for each person, for Patrick and Nick, and they only did Nick's, and it went for 2 or 3 hours. They didn't even come close to finishing. Patrick never was even heard, and it's been pushed back to, at the time of me filming this, we still don't know. I finished this board a few days ago, but I was waiting to make a video because I was hoping we would have an update on this, but right now there's still nothing, which is kind of frustrating. But it's what I was saying about the justice system being so screwed up. Like, with that, one of the good things that came out of COVID is people realized they could do a lot of stuff through Zoom meetings and remotely, and we don't all have to be in person. But imagine if this was the old way, and Patrick, who's 2 time zones away, had to, at his own expense, come out here to face Aaron for these things, and then they don't even hear him. You know, they had witnesses. Coach Scott, who is this guy right here, he was apparently supposed to be a witness. Moody was going to be a witness, and they never were called, obviously, because Patrick's case didn't come up. And again, that's another thing. It used to be a fairly common defense tactic would be to find ways to delay things, hoping that prosecution's witnesses would drop out for various reasons. Because if you don't want to be a witness, they can threaten you with being held in contempt and stuff like that. But again, it's the discretion of the district attorney. Sometimes like, hey, we're not going to put this guy in jail for this. Sometimes they will, though. It just depends. But my point is, if this was the old way, this stuff being delayed and delayed and delayed really would be to Aaron's advantage, but thankfully it's not really a factor anymore. The biggest thing that we got out of the hearing Friday, which I have not heard anybody mention, is that to me, and I had gut feelings, but I never expressed this in my other two videos when talking about Aaron and his personality issues, is that now it's pretty clear that he is a repressed homosexual. And I'm not saying that to be funny or to insult the man. There's nothing wrong with being gay if you want to be gay. It's 2025. Nobody really cares. But I've been to a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but I've been to my share of domestic issues between two queers when I was a police officer. And what was going on between these two was bringing back old memories. It made me feel like I was 25 again. There is clearly bitter breakup sexual energy between these two. Nick at court was dressed like an asshole. And again, I don't really care about Nick Rekieta. The only reason I know anything about him is because it's fuel to make fun of Aaron. But this guy broke the advice. Remember my rules about court? He was dressed like an asshole. He looked like a Miami Vice coke dealer or something stupid like that. Now, there could be some reasonings for that. He might have done that because he wanted to make himself look ridiculous. So the idea of him being threatening to somebody is ridiculous. It could be just as a fuck you to the whole proceedings because, again, he doesn't want to take it seriously because Aaron's accusations are ridiculous. The other thing, though, is it could be him just trying to be like, hey, I'm cool with his glasses and everything. Because, again, with the gay dynamic between these two, right now there's a power struggle of dominance between them. This is just my theory, but from thinking about this more, when they had their polycule, and this is Aaron's ex-wife, April, by the way. She's the one who left him for this guy. I'm thinking that when they were all on drugs, he's probably hopped up on coke, probably. This is all allegedly, so I don't get sued. Aaron was probably on Molly, which he's admitted to. And if you're not familiar with a lot of drugs, Molly is like what college girls take when they go to a party and they dance in the club with, little light glow sticks and stuff. It's not really a drug a grown man should take. But again, this is Aaron, so it does fit his personality. But anyway, he's hopped up on that. He's hopped up on his stuff. He's doing his wife. Okay, probably, if I had to recreate the scene, is that they finish, or she's not really paying attention because of all the drugs, and Aaron is there, and he decides to get involved, and he can use the drugs as his excuse to finally let go and let his gay nature come out, where maybe he gave Nick a hand job, or gave him a little bit of a blow job, sucked on his dick a little bit. Probably not to completion, and I don't think there was any kind of anal penetration. I doubt it went that far. But I bet there was some gay sexual acts that Aaron performed on Nick, more than what we already know. And again, it was done under the excuse of being high on Molly. We're like, I don't know, I lost my mind, I was crazy. Again, you see that a lot with people where they'll use drugs, alcohol, whatever as the excuse for their bad behavior. Is like, that just made me go nuts. That's my theory right now. Unfortunately, they didn't even finish his hearing. I have to say, Aaron's lawyer did a better job than Nick's lawyer, if you're being objective. There was this fat guy named Sean, who I watched some videos of. I apologize, I don't know his channel name or anything. It just popped up in my newsfeed. He is clearly biased against Nick Rekieta. It seems like there's something personal with them. Maybe they were, legal adversaries or something. But besides that, where, again, he had a clear bias, I think he made some very good points. He mentioned that Nick's lawyer really dropped the ball on a few things. When Aaron was talking about being fearful of Nick, which he fought but finally admitted. There's that great tape we've all seen of him talking about how he'd pretty much kill Nick if they got into a fight. And apparently they weren't ready with their technology and couldn't get the video to play. That was a big miss. That's like in football where, you throw a perfect throw and the guy is wide open in the end zone and the dude just fumbles the ball and it's like, shit, that was an easy, touchdown right there and you just wasted it. But right now, we're just having to wait. I have no idea when it's going to be rescheduled for. Apparently, it's going to be for like an all-day thing where they're going to have several hours set aside to finish the next thing and then several hours set aside for Patrick's. I've done a 180, by the way. I thought his was going to be cut and dry and his would be a little more complicated. Now, because of the gay tension between these two, it seems like that is the big circus, and that the one between these two is really just business, to where it's going to be, again, he's 2 time zones away. He's on the other side of the Rocky Mountains. I think that's going to be much more simpler. And the fact that Patrick is much smarter than both these guys and able to keep his head together, I think that'll definitely be in his favor. But again, I could talk about that and make a whole video, but I don't want this to run for like 3 hours. I know you got stuff to do. You don't want to just sit in your house and watch me all day. So again, I want to focus on Dabbleverse 101. Now to transition and get into that, you'll notice John and Opie, who were in my previous videos, and then Patrick Melton, this guy, I talked about him before, and Carl Heberger, from Who Are These Podcasts. Their heads are bigger than the rest. And that's because that's like the north, south, east, west of the Dabbleverse. These two are the most important, though. And again, when I was talking about John being the king of the Dabbleverse, I want to explain that a little bit. And I think this will help understand. Because Patrick Melton, who again, I'm a huge fan. I'm basically a Melton disciple. And I'll explain in this how I found him and became such a big fan. But he doesn't cover John like a lot of these other people do. He talks about him occasionally, but his big thing is Aaron. And when I was talking about John being the king, just to explain that a little better, again, Aaron is my favorite of all the people you can laugh at. But John is the most important because, as I said before, he and Opie existed independent of the Dabbleverse. If none of this other stuff existed, we all still know who John Melendez is because of the Howard Stern Show, and Greg Opie Hughes because of the Opie and Anthony Show. And they've had a huge fall from grace. And that is like the little seed that you put in the ground and then planted, and it blossomed into the tree with all the little branches that sprout out and leaves and fruit that became the Dabbleverse. A good way to explain John's importance is if I ask any of you, who's the greatest president in American history? Obviously, the answer is James K. Polk. You're thinking, Kelly, that's a stupid question. Of course, James K. Polk is the greatest president we ever had, hands down. And I would agree with you, especially in terms of what was accomplished in office and the fact that he only served a single term. But when you ask that question again and you really think about it, the answer we all have to say is George Washington. Because without George Washington and what he did, all of the other presidents wouldn't exist. Nothing else is possible without George Washington. So you have to say he's the greatest president ever. And that's like John. John is like George Washington in terms of being a piece of shit. And without him and his horrible behavior, all of these other people would exist, obviously. They're human beings. But most people, myself included, would not know anything about Aaron Imholt. We wouldn't know about Johnny Crutches. We wouldn't know. There'd be no Tukey. We wouldn't know about Mersch. And, I'll explain who these people are without this guy right here. And Greg is important too, although he's not nearly as important now in the Dabbleverse, but he is important in the origins because these two, again, were famous and they had a huge fall from grace. And this guy, Carl, started a podcast called Who Are These Podcasts? It's fantastic. If I remember, I'll post a link in my description. I did it on my last video. You probably don't need it, though. If you're watching this, you know who this guy is. And he is the godfather of creating all this. Now, some people might get insulted, but he is the one who is responsible for really exposing Opie and John for being phonies. And I'm sorry, I just blanked. But I'm not going to do a re-edit on this because I don't know how to do that stuff. But he's responsible for bringing them to light of how John has no talent, Opie has no talent. They both just rode the coattails of more successful people and really have no business being known. Now, real quick. Okay, I mentioned this guy right here. This is a guy named Mersch. He does a show called Revenge of the Sis with a partner. And it's a pretty funny show. My only criticism is they have a real hard time focusing. They'll do videos on topics that I'm very interested in, and I try to watch them, but they can't stay focused. But anyway, they made fun of Stuttering John technically before Carl. So some people try to say they were the ones that started this, but no, that's not correct. Carl gets all the credit because they made fun of John. John acted like a baby, and then that was the end of it. But there's a million examples of that. There's some examples of Anthony Cumia playfully making fun of John and John freaking out. Artie Lang, who's not pictured here because he's not in the Dabbleverse, but you should know who he is because he and John worked together on the Howard Stern show. And then again, they were both featured on Anthony Cumia's show. And many other people. You can go back 20, 30 years and find people making fun of John and talking about how he is such a loser and a phony, but they would just kind of let him off the hook and it would just go nowhere. Carl started his podcast, and basically his podcast just makes fun of other podcasts. Each episode they say, hey, listen, here's the Jimmy from Indianapolis show. It sucks. And he found Opie because after Opie was fired from SiriusXM, he started doing a podcast on a thing called Westwood One with some people that are all dead now. Opie was not responsible for their deaths, though, just to be clear on that. But Carl found it and was covering it on his podcast and talking about just how terrible it is. He's like, Opie is untalented. He's not funny. He can't read a room. He's not good at improv. He's not good at hanging with the guys. You know, he can't take a joke without getting offended. All that stuff. Which, in retrospect, all of us have gone back and listened to Opie and Anthony clips, and it's all clear as day now. But honestly, at the time, a lot of people just didn't really notice it. Opie is so hated now, and again, this is when I was talking about him being mentally ill, is you go on YouTube, and there are people that have taken the Opie and Anthony show and have gone and cut out every single bit of Opie being in there, where it sounds kind of weird because the energy of him fucking things up is still there. You can still pick up on it. But when you're listening to it, there's not a syllable of this guy talking at all. They've completely cut him out. So that's what he was doing, okay? Anthony Cumia heard that because they have a bitter breakup, and he loves when people make fun of Opie. So here's why Carl doing this. He talks about in his show. That's how I found Carl, because again, I was a Compound Media subscriber. And that's where these people come in. These are all Anthony Cumia babies right here, plus Pat Dixon, who again is not pictured. And he has his network. Now, while that's going on, Carl covers Stuttering John, who had a podcast, which, it's funny, compared to what he is now, his podcast 7 or 8 years ago was actually good. It wasn't good. It's not good. But compared to where he's at now, you would think it was a fantastic show. Carl covers it, and he says, and you can get this on YouTube if you want. He says, hey, remember this guy from the Howard Stern show? I remember him being funny, but he has a podcast now, and it's terrible. Where this guy is talking about how he was the best trumpet player in 3rd grade, and all kinds of stupid, pathetic stuff. And it's really funny. But again, Carl was making fun of him just innocently. It probably would have been a one-and-done thing, and he would have gone on to the next podcast. But John hears about this, and he reacts very poorly. Where he starts talking about how he's going to have the mafia break Carl's legs, and he's going to sue Carl, and all kinds of other stuff. And Carl, again, why he gets all the credit for the Dabbleverse, is he says, fuck this guy, I'm going to keep making fun of him. Who does he think he is? And then it spawned from there. So, of course, Anthony has a history of Stuttering John, so he hears about that. And, again, doesn't like him making fun, or he does like him making fun of Opie. And that gives him some heat. So then people like me and others start listening to his thing. And it's a great show, by the way. Who Are These Podcasts? Go subscribe if you're not already on there. But it's the single, now again, I'm a Patrick Melton disciple, okay? I love Melton and his toe coverage more than anything. But if you had to have just one show, it would be Who Are These Podcasts? Because he does the best all-around coverage of all these people. Now, I like college football. If you like football, you're familiar with what a coaching tree is. But basically, Carl, with his success of covering John and Opie, spawned a lot of children. Carl has a lot of babies. Like how Nick Saban has a lot of babies in the coaching world, Carl has a lot of babies. Now, basically, Anthony Cumia, like I said, became a fan of Carl, which is what this green line represents here. And Anthony is lazy and doesn't do much anymore. He is still around, but he doesn't do much. So all of his people, Chad Zumach and Kevin Brennan, Gino Bisconte, this is a woman named Chrissy Mayer, which I'll get back to her in a second. That's why I have the green star. They are all adopted under Carl. So these are Carl's adopted babies right here. In addition to them, though, Carl has a lot of natural-born children, which are all these people over here. Now, Carl's firstborn son is this guy named Shuli. Shuli knew John from the Howard Stern show. They didn't work directly together at the same time, but Shuli had a longer tenure on the show, was much more well-liked, and a better worker. But John is the one who is much more well-known. You have to be objective in this stuff and forget who you like and don't like. If we're being honest, and you're talking to Stern Show fans and say, hey, what bits do you remember? What made you laugh? You know, who was a better part of the show when you were listening as a fan? You would take John over Shuli, of course. And then, of course, you would take Artie Lang over John. You know, there's a hierarchy. But my point is, they did not like each other. And he would shit on Shuli a lot, and Shuli didn't do anything about it. He and Carl get in touch with each other. He's on Carl's show, and Carl, tells Shuli, he's like, you should do something about this, man. And finally, Shuli has enough, so he starts a thing called the Uncle Rico Show. He had a podcast before, it was just called the Shuli Show, and I found it before he started covering John, and again, just to be fair, it was going nowhere. It was a very tiny channel. Nobody was watching it. He only had maybe 2,000 subscribers. But once he decided to fight back and start hitting on John, the floodgates opened, and it became wildly successful. So Shuli's doing great now. And even Shuli has a baby. As you can see, Carl has lots of babies, and then some of these people have babies, which I'll get into. But Shuli is Carl's firstborn son. He has the Uncle Rico Show, becomes wildly successful, shitting on John. And the Dabbleverse just grows and grows. In addition, there's this guy, Adam Bush, who is a legitimate actor. I'd never seen these things. He was on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I never watched that show. But my point is, this guy is a legitimate actor in Hollywood, and he's a fan of the Dabbleverse. So now he gets brought in under this from making fun of John, and he's another baby. Then you have a guy named Blind Mike Geary, who's based out of Boston. He's a friend of Carl. He covers all the Dabbleverse stuff. He does some other things. He tries to not be fully in the Dabbleverse, but he knows what is going to get him views and help make him money, and that's this stuff. So he covers Aaron, he covers John, he covers some of these other idiots that pop up. Then you have this guy, Cardiff Electric, who is a potato, and that sounds goofy, but he's a fairly funny guy. But again, he's another Carl baby. Then you have this woman named Kaylee right here. Let me move this in case that's in her way. But they're actually friends in real life. Like, she lives in his town, and she does a show where she is currently covering the legal trial between John and Carl and Shuli, and she does very good legal analysis. So you should watch that if you want to keep in touch with what's going on with their civil suit going on. Then you have this guy, Carl's last natural child, named Tukey, the puppet. Now, this is actually like 3 or 4 different guys. He goes by Bedabbler and El Horrible, and he is a likable version of Gino Visconti sometimes. This guy's very talented. So you should go subscribe to him too if you're not already familiar. But then again, some of Carl's babies have their own babies, where the Dabbleverse continues to grow. So from Tukey and Cardiff, you have this guy named OJ, which stands for Obnoxious John, and then this guy, Joey C., who is just a degenerate loser, but when they cover him, it is pretty funny. And again, Shuli has a baby. This is not Tim Pool. This is a guy named Vince the Lawyer, who there are rumors that this guy is really the puppet master behind John's new lawsuit. I can't say for sure, but I will say this. Out of all the people in Dabbleverse, this is the only man that legitimately scares me. I don't want to get on this guy's bad side. He strikes me as the kind of guy that would, put arsenic in some Coca-Cola and put it in your fridge somehow, and you come home and you're drinking poison without knowing it, or call a SWAT team to your house because he says somebody's inside with a gun and they're going to kill themselves and have the cops raid your house. God forbid anything like that happens, but this guy scares me. I feel like he would do anything like that if he either thought it was funny or was offended by you in some way. So Vince, if you're watching, please don't have my family killed. Now, this is the original core of the Dabbleverse, like I talked about, is Carl making fun of John and Opie. He gets the help and support of Anthony Cumia. Cumia kind of goes by the wayside. Again, he is still around, but he's an old man. He's semi-retired. So he absorbs all of Anthony's babies, then he produces all of his babies, and then they have some babies. So if you're looking at it like a family tree, somebody like Joey C. is like the retarded great-grandson of John Melendez, which sounds goofy, but if there was a bigger age difference between these two, because they're probably about the same age, but if there was a bigger age gap, like if Joey was 25, you really could believe that he would be related to John. Now, independent of all this, okay, is this guy, Patrick Melton. He has the show Nobody Likes Onions, but he gets brought into the Dabbleverse again through Carl. Like I said, Carl is the central figure, which is why his head is right here, you know, in the middle with plenty of space around it. Is Patrick has his show, and it's successful. He's covering a bunch of different internet losers. Again, he covers John occasionally, but it's not a big thing, so he doesn't see John as a big deal. But he discovers Aaron Imholt. Okay, again, Aaron is my first, my last, my one and only. You know, we love Toe on here more than anybody. Except for maybe my beloved Tony Michaels. But Aaron really is number one. Anyway, he's covering Aaron, right? Now, the way he found Aaron is very interesting, because you'll notice this little zigzag line right here. This shows Chad Zumock, who I mentioned in my original videos as being one of the 4 horsemen of the Dabbleverse. They knew each other independently of all this from stand-up comedy. So he knew Chad, and he knew Chad's a piece of shit. So he would cover Chad and make fun of him, just like Carl would cover Chad, make fun of him. Shuley covers Chad, makes fun of him. Anthony, Kevin Brennan, they all cover Chad and make fun of them. It's fantastic. Of course, Tukey, I think, does Chad coverage the best, but Chad is very easy to slam dunk on. So there's no shortage of finding people that make fun of this guy if that entertains you. And it should, because it's very good. But anyway, okay, he is making fun of Chad, right? Aaron Imholt is in Minnesota. He's a disgraced small-time radio guy. He is special because he volunteered to get into the Dabbleverse. He talks about it now because, you know, he loves to lie about everything. But he stepped into it voluntarily because he saw the success that somebody like Carl was getting, somebody like Shuley was getting, others, and said, hey, you know what? I want to try to make a go of this podcasting thing. I can siphon off of this Dabbleverse success and bring viewers in. And I'm sure at the time he probably thought, you know, this is just to get people in the door, and then I can talk about Aaron-related things, and I'm so charismatic and funny, they will forget I'm not even talking about Stuttering John anymore, and they'll just be Toe fans. Of course, that didn't happen, for obvious reasons. But anyway, he starts covering Opie and Anthony, and he talks about John. He talks about Gino, Kevin Brennan, Bob Levy, who is not pictured here, because again, I'm just doing the core group. And he tries to pick a fight with Chad, like little old school radio drama. And the short version is Chad whipped his ass. Again, Chad Zumock, as I said, does not mind being perceived in a negative light. Aaron pretends that he's a heel, which is a wrestling term for the bad guy. Chad really does not mind being the bad guy. So he picks a fight with Chad. Chad goes after him nonstop, talks about he's going to rape his wife and all kinds of insane stuff. Aaron begs for mercy. He'll tell you some completely different story, but we all watched it when that was happening. That's what happened. Again, Patrick Melton knows Chad independently of all this. He sees that going on. He decides to cover it. Now, at the time, he does not know anything about Steel Toe. He comes in with fresh eyes, no bias of anything. So, he notices that Aaron lies about everything. And, again, it's just funny to see in real time somebody reach the same conclusions I did, because, not to get sidetracked, but I found Aaron independent of all this because, I shouldn't say independent of all this, I found him without seeing him come on any of these shows. He got suggested to me on YouTube when he had a small show. This was several years ago when he's still on with April, and he was actually trying. It wasn't a great show, but he was putting effort into it, and he was covering Dabbleverse people. So when he would do a video talking about Opie, it would come up on my YouTube, and I'd watch it. He'd do a video talking about Anthony Cumia, Stuttering John. He did videos on Tony Michaels, which I mentioned before. He was really trying to siphon off of the success of the Dabbleverse. And that's how it got suggested to me. But watching those videos, again, not knowing who any of this stuff is right here, the Patrick Melton universe, I would notice Aaron just lying about everything, where I'd say, that's not what you said, 2 days ago or something. A good example is with Opie and Anthony. He was covering these guys, and he was shitting on all of them. But again, nothing bad. He was just trying to be entertaining. So he would critique Anthony for all the weird stuff in Anthony's life. He would critique Opie for weird stuff in Opie's life. And then he was trying to get Opie to come on his show. And Opie said he would think about it. Opie went back and watched shows. And again, to Aaron's defense, because we're trying to be fair here, he didn't say anything that was really that bad. He was making fun of Opie, but it was fair critiques of what we know about Opie. Opie saw this and freaked out, because again, none of these guys can handle criticism from my original 4, I mean. And Opie tells him no. Now, Aaron repeats the story of what happened with that 5 or 6 times, and every single time he tells it, he keeps downplaying the things he said about Opie, to basically, eventually he says, hey, all I said was that Opie wasn't the funny one on the show, which is not what he said. He said harsher things than that. But again, what he said was not bad. Opie was being a baby. The point is, Aaron is lying to his audience and trying to make it seem like he didn't do anything wrong, and Opie was just being an asshole by turning him down. So then he focuses on Chad. Chad beats him, gets on Melton's radar. Melton, like myself, realizes, hey, this guy's a liar about everything, and it piques his interest. And he says, ooh, you know what? This is a new guy I can make fun of, and this is a well that is not going to run dry. So, Aaron, here's his wife at the time, April. It's his second ex-wife. He's twice divorced now. To try, again, to get some success and make his YouTube channel grow, he finds this guy named Nick Rekieta, who's an internet lawyer. They call him LawTubers, and he's also based in Minnesota. Nick Rekieta, again, I don't follow this stuff, but I did some research, and apparently he got really big during the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, and got like around 1 million subscribers on YouTube. I don't know the exact number, but it's not as high now, but he still has a really big channel, but it was bigger before all this stuff started. So he and his wife become friends with Aaron and his wife, and Aaron, to put it bluntly, basically offers his wife as like a sacrifice to try to get fame off of this guy, thinking, hey, maybe I can siphon off some of his audience where they'll come be Toe fans, and who knows, maybe I'll get 100,000 subscribers or something like that. Their whole polycule, which I've touched on in my other videos, so I'm not going to go too deep into that right now, but it all falls apart. Aaron, because he's a baby, gets them arrested, and then all of his legal troubles are going on and going on and going on. Now, when that is going on, here's where the two worlds merge. Carl has Patrick Melton on his show, which again is how I first found Melton, and Carl says, hey man, why are you so hard on this guy and his wife? And Patrick explains in a very rational way of how they're pieces of shit and they should be held accountable. That piqued my interest. I go back and I go down the rabbit hole of Melton. It's fantastic stuff. But now Carl is familiar with Aaron now. And he went on Kevin Brennan's show, again, because of the Chad stuff. He's on Carl's show. I think he even went on Shuli's show one time. I could be wrong about that. But my point is, he was going on to all these Dabbleverse shows, trying to be a part of it, trying to make sure everybody was on his side versus Chad's side and all that was going on. But when all this stuff falls apart with his wife and Nick, Carl makes the reasonable conclusion of like, hey, maybe this is some sort of radio bit. And Aaron, again, because he just is a baby and can't control his emotions, like immediately freaks out and says like Carl's an idiot, even though Carl was defending him. But he badmouths Carl, and now has, broken this bridge. So now this guy, you see these red arrows here? If you think about this as like military tactics, this fool has gone out and put himself into a deadly crossfire between two superior armies, and he's getting annihilated. So these people were in Aaron's orbit. That's his ex-wife. That's Nick Rekieta. Coach Scott, who I mentioned before. Fantastic stuff with him and Melton. A little bit with Chad, too. Not as good, but it's still something. And then this guy, Johnny Crutches, which these people have all either disappeared in the case of April, but these two have fallen under the control of Patrick Melton. Control might not be the right word, but again, like with Carl, they become like adopted children of Melton. So they're in his orbit now. All that Aaron still has is this guy, Johnny, who's just a crippled drug addict loser. If I can remember to do it, this guy, like basically all that anybody cares about him is that he is very emotional and he cries when little things happen. There's this funny video, again, if I can remember to do it, I'll add it in as a link, but it's like, I spilled my water, man. It's I don't mean to laugh, but it's so fucking funny. But basically this and Gino and Kiki, also known as Keanu, are the only allies Aaron has left. So like if he's Hitler and this is 1945, these are the people that are still in the bunker with him. Although, again, Gino is a loser and a nutcase, but overall he's under the Carl orbit. Really, He's more aligned to Aaron now, but for the purposes of categorization, he would be under the Carl sphere. Again, now these are Melton's natural babies right here. These are his adopted ones, but then he has ones. Now this guy, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, is an Arab man living in New Zealand, and he is very intelligent. He's great at researching and finding information to give to Patrick to show that Aaron is an idiot and helping in the fight against evil here. Keanu, like I said, is an Aaron ally, but the only reason anybody knows who she is really is from Melton making fun of her on his show. Then, of course, you have Haley and Jackie from Pretty Antisocial, and they have an independent channel. But again, to be fair, the only reason really anybody knows who they are is through Melton. Then you have Mersh, who has his own show, Revenge of the Sis. But he was fodder for Melton for a long time. They seem to have some kind of truce now. So he does have his own thing. But again, really in the terms of the Dabbleverse, he would be categorized under the Melton sphere, because that's where most of us know him from. Now to go back real quick, this woman, Chrissy Mayer. Funny side note, when I was making these little heads, my wife saw me putting this together, and she's like, who is this? She looks like a sex worker. Just a little funny side story. But she has a star here because she is not really important in the Dabbleverse, but I had to include her because she does factor into one very important event. She interviewed Stuttering John on a podcast she has back when COVID was big. And she innocently asked John a question about Donald Trump and comedy and politics. John, being a drunk asshole, is very rude and dismissive of her. And, he, was like, why do you want me to ask these questions? And she gets kind of taken aback. But she innocently, she was not trying to insult him, said, well, I thought you dabbled occasionally in stand-up comedy, so I thought you would have an opinion on this. John gets very offended by this. He goes, I dabbled in stand-up? Well, I've been a headliner for 20 years. Sorry, I'm just thinking, a lot of people do John impressions. The absolute best, you've got to go back and find old Stern clips, but the best John impression ever was Artie Lang. If you ever hear his Artie impression, it's different than what everybody does now, but it's the funniest John impression. But anyway, she says he dabbled in stand-up. He gets very offended. He claims to be a headliner, but we all know that John was never a comedian. Not in the old days, not now, never in the future. He has no comedic powers at all. Which, again, Carl gets all the credit for exposing that. If you're a big Stern fan, you knew John was untalented to begin with, and from watching Anthony and stuff. But again, you've got to give the credit to Carl. Not to get sidetracked from the Chrissy, I'll come back to that in a second. But real quick, like I was saying, John is like George Washington. Carl is like Christopher Columbus. Okay, back in history, you know that there were Vikings, Leif Erikson, that came to North America before Columbus. Technically, they're the ones that discovered it. Then if you want to be pissy about it, you could say, well, there were people here, so they discovered it because, the Indians and stuff. But no, Christopher Columbus discovered the New World. He gets all the credit because he's the one that made something out of it. And that's Carl. He's the one that talked about John being a loser, showed us all that he's a loser. Same for Opie, but really with John. So he deserves the credit for, again, being the godfather of Dabbleverse. And I will fight to the death anybody that says otherwise. You've got to give it to Carl. But anyway, back to Chrissy. She says John dabbles in stand-up. He handles it poorly. So then the term dabbler is born out of that. So then there's, Dabblers Anonymous, the Dabbleverse, of course. That's where that all comes from. So she has not really been important since then, but it's kind of like if there was somebody that went to McDonald's back when it started and somebody said, hey, you know what we should do? Golden arches. All right, that would be fantastic. And then they disappear. Okay? One little thing, but it's what it's known for. Nobody imagines McDonald's now without golden arches. So that's kind of like her. You have Gino, who's a big loser. Not really worth talking about much, other than there's a great side story between him and Pat Dixon, who again is not pictured because I had to make a hard cut off. But that's interesting. This guy, Kevin Brennan, who the reason why I have this here is with a guy named Stevie Lou. But Kevin Brennan branched off after, he's a Kumia baby. Okay, he'll get upset about that. And then again was adopted by Carl. That's how anybody knows who Kevin Brennan is. But he has kind of his own break-off thing called the Hackverse, where he has Stevie Lou, a guy named Quadfather, some other things. But it's not really worth talking about in this. It is attached to the Dabbleverse overall, but it would be like over here talking about their stuff. It's not really important for the core of all this. These are the people that you need to know, and they have interesting stories. One other thing is Aaron and John. Now you'll notice this thing right here. There's no direct connection between them, but I wanted to make a note of there is like this, I can't really explain it, but there's like a psychic connection or some kind of just the energy of the universe that connects these two. Because again, except for the fact that Aaron is smarter than John and John was more successful than Aaron, there's really no difference between these other than superficial things like how they look. If their looks were not so drastically different, you could make a credible theory that John is Aaron's biological father, because they are so much alike. Now, that's not true because we've seen Aaron's dad. He looks exactly like him. But, I mean, the age difference is there. You know, John touring around when he was a fake comedian when he was young off of Howard Stern, you know, could have fucked Aaron's mom back in 1987 or whatever year he was born. Because, I mean, it's like it's the same guy. It's like if Aaron was looking at a funhouse mirror, he would be John. If John was looking at a funhouse mirror, he would look like Aaron. There's just so much between these two. And again, with Aaron, real quick, another thing that really hurts him with the trial stuff is that he is just very unlikable. He's naturally unlikable, which is not his fault. He just gives off the aura of being unlikable, and then his personality makes it much worse. For example, I was traveling for work like a week ago, and I was in a hotel, and that movie A Bronx Tale came on. Great movie if you haven't seen it. I hadn't seen it in years, but there's a scene where all the Italian guys are down in the basement and they're shooting craps. And the main guy, Sonny, he's about to put down a big bet. And he's going to have a little kid throw the dice. And this guy comes up and he tries to put down a bet too. And Sonny grabs the dude's wrist and he says, "I don't want your money touching my money. I don't want your money in the same neighborhood as my money." And the guy's like, "What? My money's not good enough?" He's like, "What's wrong with me?" He's like, "Because you're a fucking jinx." And he makes the guy go stand in the bathroom while they're shooting craps. And I saw that. I was like, oh my God, that is Aaron Imholt. That's exactly what he's like. I like to gamble. I can tell you, gamblers are very superstitious about a lot of stuff. If I was in a casino and I was at the roulette table or playing blackjack or something, and Aaron came up to me, and I didn't know who he was, he just came up to me, I would instantly say, no, I'm taking my money, I'm going to a different table. I don't want to be around this fucking guy. He is going to make me lose. He's just naturally unlikable. And that's really another factor that I didn't mention before, but that does play into court cases where how you look matters. That's why I tell people, like Nick dressing like an asshole for that thing, that was stupid. And that's a sign that, you know, his lawyer fucked up. He should have said, "Why are you dressed like that?" Even though he might have had funny little side reasons. You know, we all enjoyed it. She said, "No, asshole, take the glasses off, put on a tie, sit up straight." But hopefully that's not a too big a deal because, again, the HRO thing is bullshit. So hopefully that doesn't hurt Nick too much. But how you look in court is a big deal on how you're perceived. And Aaron, even if he dresses to the nines, he still has this stupid face and just this natural aura of being unlikable that will be a factor in hurting him. And again, that's not his fault. If we're being objective, that's nothing he can help. For example, Shuli right here, who I mentioned before, Shuli is also naturally unlikable, but Shuli makes up for it by working hard, and he puts out a quality show, and he tries to ingratiate himself with other people to where you're like, okay, you know, my first impression was I don't like this guy, but he really won me over. Aaron doesn't do anything like that. My YouTube name, Ghost Cabby, that's because of a guy named Crazy Cabby on the Howard Stern Show, who's my favorite character, hands down on that. And he would battle with John. There's some fantastic stuff. That's where John had his fancy boxing match, which is really, you could argue, the highlight of his life. But after he left, Shuli came on the show, and he tried to basically copy, like I say, you know, he copied Carl with Make Fun of John. He basically tried to copy Cabby and John's thing, but was not nearly as good. So I initially did not like Shuli because of that. But then, you know, seeing him as time went by, he won me over. It's like, wow, this is a likable guy. He's genuinely nice to people, and he seems to be hardworking. So even though he was cursed with his face, you know, he's a cool dude. And that's why I intentionally chose, by the way, an unflattering picture of Carl to prove that same point. Because Carl is an ugly man. And I'm not saying that to be mean or funny, but he's not attractive. I mean, look at his face. But I like Carl. And if you get into this stuff, you will like Carl too. He's like a guy you cannot help but like. You're like, this is a guy I want to hang out with. And that's the kind of stuff that drives John nuts and drives Aaron nuts, because they just see looks because they're immature. Same thing with Shuley. They see how you look. Patrick is overweight. They see that and think, no, these guys should be loser. Like, we're in the 3rd grade. I should be making fun of the fat kid or the guy with crooked teeth instead of being an adult and say, who cares so much about how somebody looks? It's how they act, you know, because we're adults and we have to interact with each other. And that's another reason of them just causing a lot of these problems themselves, is they just are very emotionally immature people. And again, you know, that's credit to Chad, is that Chad doesn't give off that aura like Aaron. Chad is fucked up. He has lots of problems. But if you met Chad and you didn't know he was a criminal, and hopefully you don't leave your wallet or car keys or anything unguarded, you would probably like him starting out. Now, John's a piece of shit. I don't want to be friends with John, but if I ever did have the opportunity to meet John Melendez, I would love to buy him a couple of beers and just listen to him talk about the glory days at a bar. You know, I'd have my limit maybe for like an hour or 45 minutes or something like that. I wouldn't want to be running too much, but I'd be willing to do that. Aaron, okay, this is going to sound crazy. Please comment on this. If you're not going to comment on anything else, please give me your opinion. I am seriously considering going to Minnesota for his sentencing. Not for you people, not for a YouTube video, but just for me. Because I'm worried about it not being released to the public, and I don't want to hear his bullshit version of what happens. Although, he's probably going to go to jail. There's no way he's going to be able to spin that. But, like, you know, I'm not poor. So it's kind of a stupid vacation to take some time off of work to go to Minnesota. But it's something I could easily afford. And I know getting away would not be a big problem. His thing's on a Thursday, so you know, I can make a long weekend of it. I got a good friend that lives in Chicago. I could stop hanging out with him afterwards. But that's something I'm seriously considering doing. I talked to my wife. She rolled her eyes, and she thinks I'm an idiot for being so into this stuff. But she's cool with it. So that's something I'm really thinking about doing, just because, you know, I am obsessed with this toe stuff. But with the Dabbleverse, again, that's a broad overview of everything. There really are way more things you can get into. For example, these people up here. This is Richard Ojeda, and of course, my beloved Tony Michaels. Now, this little 25 plus represents a lowball number of the number of failed relationships for John Melendez, where again, he is the common factor, all of them. Anybody could make a video that would probably be at least an hour long, just breaking down all the people that are independent of each other. They don't know each other. They find John Melendez in various ways, and they start out being a friend of his. They all realize, again, independent of each other, that this guy is a fucking loser and a piece of garbage, and then they ditch him. Like Tony Michaels, he was just a lackey of John's years ago. I looked him up after I made the first video, where I started thinking about him again. And this dude has got a political channel now. It's not really interesting, but, you know, people eat that political stuff up. And he's got like 300,000 or 400,000 subscribers now. Like, the people he's got following him on YouTube, it dwarfs anybody else in the Dabbleverse. I think it's even bigger than like Anthony and Opie with their followers. So again, it just shows that John is such a fucking loser. Where this guy is nobody. He doesn't have the Howard Stern show. He's a convicted felon, this guy, okay? And he looks at John, and he's like, I can do better than this. Like, why am I with this guy? And then he goes off and he is better. So I mean, there are dozens of people, if you don't, maybe even crack 100, of individuals that you could talk about with John and their failed relationships. That could never be a board like this. Some of these people you wouldn't be able to find little heads for. That reminded me, Blind Mike right here. This is not what he looks like. This is actually a guy named Ronnie Millsap, who's a blind country singer, but I couldn't find a picture of Blind Mike, and I figured since he's blind, he's not going to know that it's not an accurate photo. But again, that was not me trying to be funny or a smart ass or anything. I just couldn't find a photo of that guy. And again, this is not Tim Pool. This is Vince the Lawyer. Very scary guy, but you can see he looks like Tim Pool if he just shaved. I think that's it for broad overview of the Dabbleverse. There's so much more I want to talk about with Toe's thing, but unfortunately, we just have a lot of unanswered questions right now, and I don't want to just ramble about that. But hopefully we do get some answers on that. I'm really, really hoping that the HRO thing gets resolved before his sentencing. That way Patrick can be in attendance. If I find out that that's done and Patrick Melton is coming back to courthouse, he might not. He might say, fuck this, I don't want to ever be around Aaron again. But if I find out how he's going, I'm definitely going then. Because he covered both of my two videos I did before, and that was amazing. Like I said, I met him once. We had a nice little conversation talking about growing up in Florida. and stuff. But I would, you know, he might say, "Fuck off, man." You know, I don't want to talk to you. But if he was willing to, I would. I mean, how great would it be to like go, you know, have a beer with this dude and Coach Scott and Nick and everything. Maybe track down April while Aaron is led away in handcuffs. That would be the ultimate way to end my Dabbleverse journey. But you know, who knows? I might be reaching for the stars on that one. But it would be fun. Anyway, hopefully I'm not forgetting anything. Oh, again, go check out Dean, okay? Because he's in the ends of the earth, so I'm sure he would love some heat coming his way. Please go see, of course, all the other side Dabbleverse shows. Go check out Tukey, he's amazing. Go check out Blind Mike, he's great. Go check out Kaylee for her legal analysis, it's great. Of course, the Shuli Show, I'm sure you're already familiar with that, but Shuli does great work. I don't think I mentioned them or mentioned him in my other videos. It's fantastic. Pretty Antisocial is fantastic. Go throw some money at Mersh. This dude's life is a train wreck. Like, I would not trust him to water my plants when I went on vacation, but he is very funny. He's like a talented Chad Zumach. So go throw him some love. Again, all these people deserve your attention because the Dabbleverse is fantastic. I hope this makes sense. Again, the breakdown here. I'll let the camera run for a few seconds in case anybody wants a screenshot of this with me out of the way. You know, post it on Reddit or something, or just keep it for your own personal reference. Have it on your phone. When you're trying to explain to Dabverse people, you can pull it up and say, look, here's this asshole, and here's a crippled guy, you know, and here's a puppet, and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, hopefully this is helpful to people. And again, if you have any comments, anything else you think is useful to talk about, you know, please let me know. Give it a little thumbs up so I know somebody's watching. Again, you don't need to subscribe. Another thing is I made this video almost out of an obligation because a bunch of people subscribed and I felt like I owed it to them since they like my other stuff. But you don't need to. Again, I know I sound like a liar because I keep saying this, but I'm not trying to be a YouTube person. I have a family. I have a job. We live on a big farm. I've got a lot of stuff to deal with outside. The only reason I'm able to make this now is because it's been storming all day, so I can't go outside. But again, I do appreciate people watching it and enjoying it. I hope you like this as much as the other videos. I'm not going to bullshit. I'll probably make another video sometime in the future because I got to talk about the conclusion of the Aaron saga. But we're just going to have to wait on that because unfortunately, again, when I'm talking about court, it just keeps pushing back and push back and push back. And this is why the justice system sucks. But thankfully, he's the one having to deal with it, not me.